Welcome back. I'm pleased to be joined now by Dr. Carmine Stewart, President and CEO of Aspire Consulting and Educational Services. Also joining us is Christopher Richards, the site coordinator of Seeds of Literacy West. That should be Seeds of Literacy West. Thanks to both of you for being here. Thank you very much for coming in. Let's talk a little bit about who you are individually, where you're from, that kind of thing real quick, and then we'll get into what the Seeds of Literacy is all about.
Okay.
So, Dr. Stewart.
Well, my name is Carmen, and I'm from the Cleveland area. I've been working in the field of adult literacy for 10 years, initially as a teacher and then as a professional developer. In our field, teachers don't have to have any kind of minimum qualifications or certifications, so a lot of teachers just kind of fall into the field. You could be an adult literacy teacher tomorrow. And my company, Aspire Consulting and Educational Services, was founded to provide training, professional development, and technical assistance to organizations like Seeds of Literacy so that they're better prepared to help our students who sometimes have learning disabilities and difficulties.
What led you into doing what you now do? I mean, we all have a reason for doing what we do.
Well, honestly, like most people in our field, I sort of fell into it. I was doing some volunteering for a local family support organization, Family Connections, and they had a family literacy program. They lost their GED teacher on a Friday, and they called me that afternoon and said, hey, can you help us? And it actually just ended up being exactly where I wanted to be in my life. I was a trained educator, and I knew that I didn't want to work in K-12, and adult literacy students needed someone who had that educational background, and so I was able to fill that.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Richards.
Yeah, actually my story is pretty similar to what Carmen was just talking about. I graduated in 2007 hoping to be a high school social studies teacher, and an opportunity to help with adults kind of popped up unexpectedly. I thought, oh, this will be a thing that'll temporarily hold me over. And I just really fell in love with it. I fell in love with working with adult students, and I've been doing it for now over 10 years.
Excellent. Thank you both for doing that. Let's talk a little bit about Seeds of Literacy, what its mission is and how you meet that mission.
Yeah, so Seeds of Literacy is a group that was founded actually 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary by the Sisters of St. Joseph. So we originally were a ministry from them. We're now a separate, non-religiously affiliated 501c3 nonprofit. But the mission has always been to help adults. And from the beginning, it was focused on fighting poverty through education, and now it's broader. The mission is more about helping adults succeed in their communities, which can mean a whole lot of different things. So most of our students are coming in reading below 4th or 5th grade level. A huge proportion of the city of Cleveland, this is a number that shocks a lot of people, about 66% of the people in the city of Cleveland are reading below that threshold, and that's what we call functionally illiterate. That is, they can read very simple words or sentences, but real deep comprehension or real deep learning from literacy is not happening. So we want to help anybody 18 or older who wants to get their education back on track.
And that is so key. I know that one of the pushes that we hear about all the time in education is making sure that kids, by the time they're in 3rd grade, can read to learn, so then they could rather learn to read so they can then read to learn and comprehend. And you're saying that in Cleveland, in some communities, up to 66% are functionally illiterate.
That 66% is actually the city as an aggregate. If you look at some neighborhoods, it goes in 70, 80, even 90% in some neighborhoods of the city.
That is discouraging, but encouraging that the need is being met and or helped by what you do.
Absolutely.
When you talk with an adult who's having a problem reading, or whatever that problem may be, comprehension, reading a contract or a job application, how do you help them navigate that? And also, is it like a one-time thing? Is it an ongoing program?
Well, it's definitely ongoing, because if you think about it, it takes 12 years to get an education that prepares you for the workforce, that prepares you for post-secondary education. So for our students, it can be a very long stride. I mean, some of our students come in, maybe they completed 10th grade in high school, but they've been out for a while, and maybe they weren't reading on grade level when they were there. So they may test at a 3rd or 4th grade level, and it really is kind of an extensive process. And what we do is we assess them to find out what their needs are, where their starting point is, and then we provide the curriculum to help them get them from where they are to where it is that they need to go, and give them little guideposts along the way so that they can see themselves attaining goals little by little.
And an important thing about what Seeds of Literacy does, we really do try to make sure that we're focusing on the individual, because each one of our students is coming in with a different background, different experiences, different knowledge. And so we don't just throw everybody into a traditional classroom. It's not one teacher doing a sage on the stage sort of teaching model. It's one-to-one tutoring. So we actually have a really amazing group of almost 200 volunteers that help us work with our students. And the reason we do that is because if traditional education setups worked for our students, they wouldn't be our students. So we have to do something different. We have to be innovative. We really have to be making sure we're proactive at meeting people where they are.
You know, it's really interesting that at one point America was the #1 when it came to education in the world. And now we're way, way, way down the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that in itself is an indictment on the educational system. Not to say that the educators are not dedicated individuals trying to do what they can do given the resources they have, but obviously falling off way down the line, 17th in some things, 21st in some other things, math and reading and science and that kind of thing. You know, here in the 21st century, in the most prosperous nation on the planet, you know, and to see that there is such a need. It's really discouraging, but it is encouraging that Seeds of Literacy and other programs like yours are out there meeting that particular need. Now, when we talk about adult illiteracy, being functionally illiterate, I find that many people are pretty ingenious. They find a way to cope.
Absolutely.
You know, even though they can't read at that level, they find a way to make it seem as if they can, or they find a way to function.
A huge number of my students come in and you would never guess where their reading level is based off of the way that they present themselves and the way that they speak. And I've had a number of students who are coming to me and they say, you know, please don't put my name on anything or my picture on anything because people don't know that I can't. A lot of our students have unfortunately had to try and make people think that they have gotten through high school. Sometimes family, sometimes it's an employer, but a lot of times they're just trying to make sure they can actually get that credential so that they're no longer living with this kind of secret shame. A lot of folks, really, it's a difficult thing to admit that you need help and that you need to go back. And the outlook is actually only getting worse because the changes that are going on in education right now, especially in adult education, are pretty significant. So it's only actually getting even more difficult for people.
And we find even those who try to go to college after getting their GED or their diploma, many colleges are having to do remedial education just to get them to the point they can read and comprehend.
Yeah. The latest statistic that I heard from Cuyahoga Community College, which is where a lot of students in Ohio go, is that with their students who have a high school diploma and their students who are GED completers or high school equivalency completers, 76% still test into that remedial education. And the way that that impacts them is that they end up using their student loans and their financial aid to get courses that they could have to learn material that they should have mastered in high school or in an adult literacy program. And so part of the move in adult literacy now is to help students get to the point where they're able to go beyond that developmental education and into the classes that will actually count toward a degree.
You know, I've heard some very inspiring stories. I was fortunate enough about 5 years ago to speak to a graduating class over at Seeds of Literacy. And I did a couple of stories on some young people who came, some adults who came through the program, and to hear the inspiration, the hope they now have about being able to have a future for themselves and their families is just unbelievable. But oftentimes people will say, well, you know, I don't have this, I'm afraid, I'm ashamed, I'm not going to go, I'm just going to try and cope, try to get by, try to get through. And they retard their abilities to make money, to move up the ladder to another strata when it comes to economics and all of that. But what you're saying here is don't give up hope, find a way. Come on in, talk to us, right?
Yeah, and we actually offer classes 3 times during the day, morning, afternoon, and evening. 4 days a week. We try to keep our schedule incredibly flexible so that people can get in, because a lot of our students are working 1, sometimes 2 jobs. They're taking care of kids. It is incredibly difficult, but if we can find a way to work with somebody, we want to make sure we can do that.
Right.
Now, just because it is difficult does not mean that it is impossible.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything is possible. Before I get into the grant that you guys just got, the grants that you got, I'm going to go ahead and take a break. We have about a minute left in this segment. I'm going to go ahead and short shrift that, come back and give you more time on the other side to talk about that, the $425,000 grants they receive. If and when it happens, we talk about it here on CLE 43 Focus. Here are just some of the topics we cover: family issues, the economy, employment, and education, as we're doing this morning. We also talk about health and health care, alcohol, crime, domestic violence, drugs, and policing. We talk about housing and politics. We also talk leadership, race relations, diversity, and inclusion. confusion. Now, if you know someone who can talk clearly about any of these issues, drop me an email at hboomer@cleveland19.com with their info for consideration to be a guest on the show. We'll be right back with more Seeds of Literacy.